Okay, so I guess it is not going to work properly. So I'm sorry, guys. Thanks for bearing with me. Okay, so we are going to talk about today how to pass your contractor's license, and I am going to go over the highlighted answers that possibility 99% will be on your test. So again, my name is Kathy Parker, and I'm going live in my group Success Starts With You, as well as on my YouTube, which is Cats Lounge, CATZ Lounge, Lounge. And the first book we're going to do is it's called Nascla, a Contractor's Guide. This book is what you are going to need to help you pass the contractor's license, and I have all the tabs. So if you have this book, it's great for you to take in with you, and you can highlight the answers, take that in. So if you are joining on Facebook, I'm letting you know that you also could join on YouTube, because usually Facebook kicks me off in a little bit. So if you're not following me, Cats Lounge, CATZ LOUNGE. So I'm going to go over some of the answers on here, and then the rest would be uploaded on my YouTube, so you can follow that on there. So if you are trying to get your contractor's license, I had it posted in my Parker's Academy. However, because it was so much, I guess so many people trying to do it at the same time, the videos weren't playing. So I said I was going to just put it up live and let you guys see it. So what I did was I highlighted my table of contents, right? And it makes it easier for you to find the answers, because you can associate the subject with the sentence. So for instance, if your question on your exam is something to do with a business plan, it's easy to find your table of contents, find the answer, look for the business section, boom, and then you look it up, right? Versus you trying to go through the book like this, trying to figure out where is the answers. So some quick tips with taking the test. It's not really how much you know about contracting. It's more about the business part. So, if you're going in saying like, oh man, I know everything about measurements, or I know what we call these tools, it's not about that, right? So it is about more of the business structure, because when you think about starting a business, that's the most important part. All right. So if you have your book that's in the table of contents, the first thing that you are going to highlight is chapter 4, and that's managing risk. Chapter 7 is bidding and estimating, and chapter 8 is contract management. Chapter 9, scheduling and project management, and underneath that is calendar, scheduling, bar chart scheduling, and critical path method. And all I'm doing is I'm reading off to you so you can highlight your book as we go along, because I'm not going to do a lot of talking in between, because it'll make it longer, because the book is already long enough. All right. So if you pop up on my live, I'm not ignoring you. It's just going to take so long if I keep doing shout outs. All right. Chapter 11, other labor laws. Chapter 12, safety standards. Chapter 12, hyphen 13, it's the erosion and control measurements. Chapter 14, financial measurements. And chapter 15 is tax basics. Chapter 16, Virginia mechanics and material men's lien laws. And that is the table of contents. So if you're joining on Facebook, again, join me on my YouTube, and we will finish the book on the YouTube. Okay, guys? All right, so success starts with you. Join YouTube, Cats Lounge, CATZLOUNGE. All right, part 1. And this is for Virginia only. And the reason why I'm doing this is because a lot of people try to make so much money off of people that, you find yourself trying to start a business already. You're putting up a lot of money already, and you don't have $200 or $300 to pay for a test, and you just want to start your career. All right, so 1-2, elements of a business plan. Under that, you're going to highlight executive summary. Under that, you're going to highlight products and services. 1-3, market analysis. You want to highlight that. You want to highlight marketing strategy. You want to highlight financial plan. And again, these are possible answers that would be on your Contractors Virginia license test. Chapter 2, choosing your business structure. You want to highlight what a sole proprietorship is. You want to highlight also advantages of a sole proprietorship, freedom in decision-making process, disadvantages of a sole proprietor, unlimited personal liability, dissolution of business in the event of the owner's death. You want to highlight partnerships. A partnership is a relationship between two or more persons who join to carry on a trade business. Liability, all owners. Each partner is responsible for the acts of the other partners when they act in the name of the business. You want to highlight advantages of a general partnership. You want to highlight also disadvantages of a general partnership. And under that, you want to highlight the first check mark, which says unlimited personal liability of general partners. 2-3, you want to highlight C corporations. 2-4, advantages of a C corporation, limited liability for stockholders. Disadvantages of a C corporation, you want to highlight the fourth check mark, double taxation, one on the corporate profits and again on dividends. For S corporations, you can avoid double federal taxation. You want to highlight requirements for an S corporation. You want to highlight the second check mark, no more than 75 shareholders who are citizens or legal residents of the United States. 2-5, you want to highlight limited liability company. Limited liability companies offer some protection from liability for actions taken by your company or by other members of your company. It does not protect from liability from the personal actions. In this way, it resembles a sole proprietorship rather than a corporation. 2-6, you want to highlight summary of business legal structures. So that whole chart has a possibility of having test questions come out of that. You also want to highlight joint ventures. Joint ventures exist when two or more companies join to undertake a specific project. You want to highlight in the box that says Virginia State Statute. Each contracting party or joint venture shall be properly licensed under the Virginia licensing law, or a proper contractor's license shall be obtained in the name of the joint venture. All right, we're on chapter 3. You want to go to 3-3 and highlight the Class B, 10,000 or less, more, but less than 120,000. You want to go to 3-4, licensing process. 3-5, number 4, an annual report, balance sheet, or financial statement must accompany Class A license applications. You want to go to 3-8, highlight $400,000 in the second row. And talk about assessments. Now we're on chapter 4. You want to highlight 4-2, the type of insurance, the whole entire chart, minimum insurance coverage, and it talks about commercial, automobile liability, workers' compensation, and occupational diseases, employer's liability. Property insurance. Property insurance on 4-3, you want to highlight the first sentence. Property insurance typically covers your business and personal property when damage, theft, or loss occurs. Also on 4-3, you want to highlight all risk builders risk insurance. This type of insurance typically covers machinery, equipment, materials, supplies, and fixtures that are of the structure or will become part of the structure. 4-4, liability insurance. You want to highlight commercial general liability, bodily injury that results in actual physical damage or loss to property not belonging to the business, personal injury, including slander or damage to reputation. Also, advertising injury, sorry, includes charging of negligence that results from promotion of goods or services. Most businesses in the construction industry will need to supplement their CGL policy with other types of insurance, such as vehicle insurance policy. 4-5, Key Man Life Insurance. That is if your company depends on specific individuals for continuing success of your business. You want to have that in place. Employment related insurance, Virginia coverage requirements. Under Virginia law, employers who regularly employ 3 or more full time or part time employees must purchase and maintain workers' compensation insurance. 4-8, what is a bond? The types of bonds, you want to highlight that. A bid bond guarantees that the contractor, if awarded the job, will do the work at the submitted bid price, enter into a contract with the owner, and furnish the required performance and payment bonds. A performance bond guarantees that the contractor will complete a contract within its time frame and conditions. A payment bond guarantees subcontractors and suppliers that they will be paid for the work if they perform properly under the contract. A maintenance bond, need to highlight that definition. A completion bond, highlight that definition. A fidelity bond, highlight that definition. And also a lien bond, highlight that definition. On 4-9 at the bottom, you want to highlight the Miller Act. And the Miller Act is a current law requiring, on page 410, performance and payment bonds on all federal construction projects valued at greater than $100,000. You want to highlight the next paragraph with the 2 check marks, talking about a performance bond and a separate payment bond. All right. Now we are going to go to page 7-1, so chapter 7, talking about bidding and estimating. Accurate estimating is important to the profitability of a construction company. Bid documents, you want to highlight all the check marks for that, including the check mark on 7-2 about supplements. You also want to highlight if the changes are made to a bid package before it is due, that is called an addendum. 7-2, you want to highlight project documents. The second check mark, talking about specifications, you want to highlight that whole paragraph. 7-3, determining estimated costs. You want to highlight the quantity takeoff method, that whole paragraph. 7-4, you want to highlight the steps. So step 1, determine labor costs for each task. You want to also highlight anything that has to do with math problems. So required labor hours per task multiplied by the labor rate equals the labor cost per task. You also want to highlight the last sentence in that next paragraph. Hours spent planning and scheduling must also be figured into the labor cost equation. Another helpful tool when determining labor costs is your historical cost data. Add labor burden, that's step 2. You want to highlight these obligations add approximately 30% of your labor costs. So step 3, determining your material costs. You want to highlight the math problem, price per unit, multiply number of units needed equal total material unit cost. Step 4, you want to highlight determine project equipment costs. Now you want to go down to own equipment. You want to do the first check mark, actual value of equipment factoring in its age and amount of what is it? Fired. Sorry. The first check mark, just do that. Okay. Then next paragraph is the unit cost. You want to highlight that paragraph and also the for example paragraph. And then as well as if you estimate using the equipment paragraph, you also want to highlight the rental equipment, equipment rental rate, labor costs to pick up and return equipment. You want to highlight all those check marks for that. Step 7, add contingencies. In the next row, contingency markups are generally based on risk level of the project. Step 8, add project overhead. You want to highlight the first sentence. Project overhead costs are items that are necessary to complete the project. You also want to highlight the check marks for bond and temporary office. Step 9, add company overhead. You want to highlight all the check marks for that area. 7-7, you want to highlight adding overhead to the bid and also the example they give and also the math calculation problem. Step 10, you want to highlight add markup and determine your profit margin. In the next column, you want to go to the second paragraph. The standard industry markup is 15%. You want to highlight that. If your markup is too low, you may not cover your project costs, causing you to break even or lose money on the job. Next, other methods of estimating, you want to highlight that. And also conceptual estimate, you want to highlight that. 7-8, you want to highlight the first sentence in the first check mark paragraph. And then the second check mark paragraph, you want to highlight the first sentence in that. About square foot method and the unit price method. 7-7, job cost recording system. You want to highlight the second check mark. Legally speaking, on chapter 8, contract management, you want to highlight that first sentence. Contracts are legally binding agreements between two or more parties. The next column, you want to highlight the Virginia written contract requirements and then highlight all the check marks for that area. And guys, if I'm going too fast, you always could stop and replay or go back and listen to this again, as many times as you need to. So 8-2, you want to highlight all the check marks for the remaining of the page before it. Also, you want to highlight the required contract elements, offer and acceptance, consideration, competent parties, and legal purpose. You want to go to the next column and highlight negotiation. 8-3, legal purpose. Contracts must be possible to perform, not intended to harm anyone, and cannot require any illegal activity. You want to go to the next paragraph, make it clear. Contracts should be clear and concise. Contract price and payment terms. You want to go to the second column and highlight progress payments. And then you want to go to the paragraph that starts with, it is important to monitor the progress payment. You want to highlight the last sentence of that paragraph. The architect or engineer certifies each progress payment by confirming the information in the partial payment estimate. You also want to highlight retainage, and then you want to highlight generally 10% in that paragraph on 8-3. Okay. 8-4, contractors' obligations include but are not limited to. You want to highlight all the check marks under that. And then also owner's obligation. You want to highlight the check mark that says issuing, I'm sorry guys, issuing payments according to specific progress payments, also paying for all required permits, and then the last check mark, providing access to the construction site in a timely manner. You also want to highlight on 8-5, breach of contract. Material breach is a serious violation of the contract. You also want to highlight the last sentence of that paragraph. This type of breach may void the contract and will most likely end up in litigation. The next paragraph, the injured party can seek monetary damages for the loss suffered as a result of the breach, and sometimes the damages are written into the contract. These are called liquidated or stated damages. And then you want to go to the next column and talk about immaterial and partial breach and highlight that paragraph. Then the last two check marks on that page talk about the acts of God and indemnification. You want to highlight those two check marks. 8-6, you want to highlight delays and extensions. You want to highlight that sentence, well, the first two sentences and then the last sentence of the paragraph. So you might as well highlight the whole paragraph with delays and extensions of time on 8-6. You also want to highlight schedule acceleration, and in general, if the owner requires a contract, you want to highlight that, the rest of that paragraph. Artistic changes, you want to highlight that. And also on the next column on 8-6, you want to highlight types of construction contracts. You want to go to lump sum contract and highlight agrees to complete the project for a predetermined specific price. Let's see. I just want to make sure everything is still running. All right. Next, 8-7, you want to highlight unit price contract. A price per unit is calculated for each item, and the contractor is paid according to the actual quantities used. Cost plus contract, you want to highlight the first sentence of what that is. Next, single prime, you want to highlight what the single prime is. Design and build, you want to highlight one company to complete the process from start to finish. All right, 8-7, you want to highlight turnkey. Contractor also obtains financing and land, but will expand responsibilities and liability. You also want to go to fast track construction, highlight the first sentence, as well as multiple prime contracts, and highlight the first sentence as well. You want to go to 8-8 and highlight a change order at the bottom of the page and what a change order is. The second row, you want to highlight changes prior to the contract award are called addenda, and the changes made after the contract is signed and executed is called modifications. Okay, you want to highlight the last paragraph, project schedule during the claims resolution process. The project cannot be delayed. You want to highlight that. You also want to highlight alternative dispute resolution on page 8-9. 8-10, you want to highlight contract documents and project manual on 8-10. And the next the next column, you want to highlight the sentence that says the following is a detailed summary of the documents contained in a typical project manual. You also want to highlight bid documents, invitation to bid, all those check marks you want to highlight for bid documents, contract provisions, and supplemental forms. At the bottom of the page, you want to highlight are all agreements legally binding. 8-11, you want to highlight the last sentence in the second paragraph, which it says, in a legal judgment, written agreements always take precedence over oral. Next, you want to highlight legal interpretation. And in the next column, you want to highlight the paragraph that starts with if the provision being disputed is vague. Highlight that whole entire paragraph. All right. Chapter 9-2, float time. Float time is the remaining time after a task is complete and before the next task begins. You want to highlight the second and third check mark. 9-4, bar chart scheduling. You want to highlight the first sentence of bar chart scheduling. 9-5, you want to highlight critical path method and what that is. 9-6, you want to highlight scheduling and cash management. You want to highlight working capital. What is working capital? The next column, a preliminary cash flow budget. I'm getting tongue-tied, sorry. You want to highlight what that is, as well as who is the project manager. You want to highlight the construction project managers, that first sentence, and then the check mark that states determining labor requirements. And also on page 9-7, monitoring compliance and building safety codes. All right. Also on 9-7, you want to go to project supervisory team. Superintendent, you want to highlight what a superintendent is. Also in the next column, you want to highlight the last check mark that says maintaining project records and reports. The next, you want to highlight foreman. The foreman assists the superintendent with daily project operations. And then the next sentence, you want to highlight that. 9-8, you want to highlight tracking the progress of the project. Highlight daily reports. A daily log is a useful project tool. A daily log can list weather conditions. 9-9, you want to highlight budget and cost controls. You want to highlight just in time, that first sentence, and then as well as the last sentence. Less inventory on site will also cut down the risk of theft and vandalism. 9-10, budget tracking. The easiest way to track your budget is to use the cost estimate in a job cost system to determine if you have cost overruns. You want to get to, let's see, chapter 11. And you want to turn to 11-4. You want to highlight Fair Labor Standards Act. And with that, you want to highlight it applies to employers who have one or more employees. The first check mark, the second check mark, you want to highlight the first sentence of both of those. Determining exemption status. Some employees are exempt from the overtime pay provisions or both the minimum wage and overtime provisions. And you want to highlight professional employees. 11-5, you want to highlight work week defined under FLSA. Every time I took a test, that question was on every test. Work hours defined under FLSA. FLSA does not require vacation, holiday, severance, or sick pay, meals or rest periods, holidays off or vacations, premium pay for weekends or holiday work. You want to look on the next column and highlight record keeping under the FLSA. 11-6, penalties. Willful violations of employment under FLSA may be prosecuted criminally and the violator fined up to $10,000. A second conviction may result in imprisonment. I-9 forms will be completed with required documentation within 3 days of hire. A sample I-9 form is located at the end of this chapter. 11-7, employees can provide one of the following documents that establishes both identity and employment eligibility. U.S. passport. That's on 11-7. And towards the bottom of that page, documents that establish identity include state-issued driver's license with photo. The next column on 11-7, documents that establish employment eligibility include the U.S. Social Security card issued by the Social Security Administration, and then the Americans with Disability Act. You want to highlight what that act consists of. Then you go to 11-8. On 11-8, it is sorry. It's like, why is my screen not moving? All right, 11-8, conditions covered. You want to highlight that. Also, you want to highlight HIV infection, highlight an individual with a minor non-chronic. 11.9, highlight the top of the paragraph, take up to 12 weeks of unpaid job protected leave each year with the maintenance of group insurance. The next column, the right to work. Virginia is a right to work state. You want to go towards the Virginia employment laws and highlight withholding of wages. No employer may withhold or divert any portion of an employee's wages unless required or empowered by the state or federal law, or unless the employer has written authorization from the employee. 11.14, Virginia coverage requirements. Under Virginia law, employers who regularly employ 3 or more full-time or part-time employees must purchase and maintain workers' compensation insurance. 11.15, you want to highlight in the second column, contractor subcontractor relationship. Highlight that paragraph. 11.16, you want to go towards the bottom and highlight required employment records. Employers are, and highlight all the check marks, as well as in the second column, all the check marks in 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, now we're going to go to chapter 12, and you're going to go to 12.3, safety equipment. You want to highlight all the check marks from 12.3 to 12.4. You also want to highlight on 12.4 emergency action plan, and the sentence that says if you have more than 12 employees, your plan must be in writing. The second column, you want to highlight for the record every employer covered by OSHA who has more than 10 employees. And then you want to highlight OSHA Form 300, OSHA Form 300A, and OSHA Form 301. You want to highlight OSHA Form 301 and what it is. It's an incident report. You also want to go to 12.5 and highlight time frame to retain records. It's 5 years. Exposure records and medical records must be maintained for 30 years. And also reporting fatalities and hospitalizations. When a work-related fatality or incident that requires hospitalization of 3 or more employees occur, you want to highlight those 2 check marks. As well as on 12.7, material safety data sheets, you want to highlight the first check mark for that. You want to go to 12.7, the last paragraph where it says penalties, and it says OSHA enforcement. You want to highlight the first sentence in that paragraph. On 12.8, you want to highlight everything that's in the penalty type box as far as the bolded part. And then also with the willful violation, you want to highlight the first sentence that talks about the $70,000 with a minimum penalty of $5,000 for each violation. In the second column, you want to highlight repeated violation, failure to abate, prior violation, and then the civil penalty of the $7,000 for each day. You also want to highlight the de minimis violation. And now we're going to go to 12.12. You want to highlight inspections, 10 working days. You also want to highlight the Clean Water Act and the last check mark on that page. You want to go to 12-5 and highlight lid. You want to highlight engineering controls to reduce worker exposure includes, and the 2 check marks that start that off. Now you can turn to 12.16 and you can highlight required notification, that first sentence, and then confirmation of the receipt of the lid pamphlet or a certificate. Mailing must be kept for 3 years. You want to go to the second column and highlight the first sentence of lid abatement. And then penalties, you want to highlight 37,500 per day for each violation. All right, financial management. Chapter 14 talks about bookkeeping. You want to highlight bookkeeping, and then the second sentence in that paragraph, bookkeeping involves the accurate recording of all financial transactions that occur in the business. And then you want to highlight all the check marks for that. You want to go to 14-2. Step 1, you want to highlight the accounting cycle and then also the check marks. And then you want to highlight the cash distribution journal, disbursement journal, and as well as step 2, the last sentence. Most companies use 5 basic types of accounts. You want to highlight all the types of the accounts. And then you want to go to the chart of accounts, highlight all of those, and then also highlight the accounts are located in a general ledger. One question that's on there about the ledger is like, you can keep different ledgers for different things. And the answer is, yeah, you should. So you shouldn't have your payroll mixed up with your daily ledgers of the day. All right, 14.3, understanding debits and credits. You want to highlight assets increases and decreases, expenses increases and decreases. So you'll know when that question comes and you won't get confused. All right. 14-3, that second column, you want to highlight the 3 basic types of financial statements. You want to highlight all 3 check marks. Then highlight a balance sheet, what a balance sheet is. And then, so the first 2 sentences of that. And also, assets equal liabilities plus owner's equity. You want to highlight assets. You want to go all the way till you get to current assets. The next paragraph, you want to highlight property and equipment and what fixed assets are. Land, buildings, equipment, and furniture would all be considered fixed assets. You want to go to the last paragraph in that row and talk about liabilities. You want to highlight that until you get to the current liabilities, bolded words. 14-4, you want to highlight long-term liabilities are debt obligations that extend beyond 1 year. You also want to highlight current assets minus current liabilities equals working capital. And on the budget balance sheet, you want to highlight balance sheet, assets, current liabilities, long-term liabilities, and owner equity. So when they give you problems on there, it makes it easier for you to see where you need to put your figures at. And I would say still use it as a guide, because a lot of times our brain and our mind, and we taking tests, it thinks one thing and it totally is not what the question they're asking. So make sure you write it out. They'll give you these little either pens, paper, or these computerized pieces of, I don't know what you call it, tablet. 14-5, income statement. The income statement, sometimes called the profit and loss statement, is a summary of the company's revenues and expenses over a given period of time. Go to the math problem and highlight what net income is and gross profit. Now you want to highlight direct costs, the sentence of what direct costs are. Operating expenses, you want to highlight that first sentence. And then the second column, you want to highlight the income statement is used by investors or lenders to determine the profitability of the company. You want to go to 14-6, the income statement. You want to highlight revenues, expenses, net income. You also want to highlight 14-7. It talks about the ratios. You want to highlight the current ratio, current assets, the math problem, You want to highlight everything that has a ratio on it, quick ratio. Again, the math problems, highlight all of those. 14-8, you want to highlight the debt ratio and also the math problem. You also want to highlight return on the total asset ratio and then the math problem. Methods of accounting, you want to highlight cash method, accrual method, and then you want to highlight what both of those are in the definitions. Completed contract method, you want to highlight the first sentence under that. And then 14-9, you want to highlight percentage of completion method and what it is. Then you go on the next column, you want to highlight the math equation. And also, once the percentage of the completion is calculated, that sentence, the math problem, the next paragraph after that, with adjustments must be made on the balance sheet for billing, and then the math problem, highlight that. All right, now we're going to go to page 14-12, using straight line depreciation. You want to highlight that paragraph, and also the calculation. You want to highlight both of those. Using the accelerated depreciation method, you want to highlight that sentence. Then go into the next column. You want to highlight accounting process for materials. You want to highlight the 2 check marks for the FOB freight prepaid and the FOB freight allowed. 14-13, you want to highlight calculate gross pay and then the last sentence of that paragraph. Now we're going to go to chapter 15, and it's called Tax Basics. You want to highlight employer identification number. You want to highlight that first paragraph and then highlight the next paragraph with the 2 check marks, talking about a sole proprietorship and the LLC. Now you want to go to 15-4, highlight deposit schedule, the first sentence for that, and then the second paragraph, the first sentence for that. You are a monthly scheduled depositor if your total payroll tax liability for the previous 4 quarters, July to June, was $50,000 or less. All right, you want to go to 15-5, form 941. If you report less than $2,500 for the quarter, you can use the IRS form 941, quarterly employer's tax return, to make payments by the due date of the return. Go to the bottom, deposit requirements for your deposit purposes. Figure FUTA tax quarterly and highlight the next sentence. You want to go to penalties and highlight the word penalties so you'll know where that's at, because they do talk about penalties throughout the test. 15-6, you want to highlight 2%, 5%, and 10%. That's important because they do talk about that. 15-7, you want to highlight tax calendar, and you want to highlight by January 31st, and then highlight furnished W-2 form, furnished form 1099. Then you want to do by February 28th, a copy A of the W-2 forms, wage and tax statement with W-3 form. (15-8), you want to highlight the sentence that starts with businesses in Virginia must register the Virginia Department of Taxation before beginning operation. You also want to highlight corporate tax income tax rate. A corporation taxable net income is 6% of the company's federal taxable income. You also want to go to page 15-9 and highlight in the second column penalties and interest, and you want to highlight all 3 of those paragraphs. All right, now we're going to go to chapter 16. Chapter 16 is Virginia mechanics and materialmen's lien law. you want to highlight in the second column who is entitled to a mechanic's lien. State statutes design lien rights for contractor, subcontractor, laborer, or material supplier. You want to highlight that paragraph. 16-2, you want to highlight the deadline to file that paragraph. Then you want to go to 16-3 and highlight requirements for 1 or 2 family resident dwelling. You want to highlight that entire paragraph. Now you want to go under if the notice is not provided in proper time, the time frame. Lien rights are limited to labor performed or materials furnished on or after the date a notice is given to the mechanic's lien agent. You want to go to subcontractor requirements, notification to the owner in addition to complying with the memorandum of the lien, and notice to the mechanic's lien agent requirements. Subcontractors must give the owner notification of the amount and the nature of the lien claim. On 16-3, you want to go to the next column and you want to highlight the lien foreclosure petition, that paragraph that talks about action to foreclose on. You want to highlight that entire paragraph. And now you're going to go to lien priorities. You want to highlight the last paragraph with liens of persons performing manual labor have priority over material men. You want to highlight that paragraph. At the bottom, penalties, you want to highlight the last sentence in that paragraph. And now we're going to go to 16-4. You want to highlight summary of a lien process, and you want to highlight the little chart that talks about the notices and the notice to the owner. One thing that I thought was helpful when I went through this is to also know where the glossary was. And so that's important because sometimes they, say some words and you're like, well, what does that mean? You can just look up the definition and that kind of helps you figure it out. All right, so your glossary should be next. And then the next thing is the Appendix E. And so with the appendixes, I will go again live and do this section. But so far we have completed the main part of your book for the chapters. So now you have left your appendix sections, and then as well as anything that goes behind that. All right, guys, thanks for participating in the Parker's Learning Academy with review of how to get your contractor's license. This is part 1. Part 2, we will upload and you can finish this book. And then part 3 would be going over the law part, which is important for you to highlight